Hi class, this is problem number 4 on our notes for our story problems day 1. This one can be kind of tricky, so please listen very closely. It says, John and Eleanor, two different people, drove a total of 777 miles in 13.2 hours. So evidently a road trip is going on. They're going quite a distance, and it's taken them 13.2 hours to drive that far. John drove the first part of the trip and averaged 55 miles per hour. Eleanor drove the remainder of the trip and averaged 65 miles per hour. For what length of time did Eleanor drive? Evidently, Eleanor, because maybe that person has a little bit more of a lead foot, is driving a little bit faster, going 10 miles per hour faster. So for this one, what we want to do is we want to set up a chart. You might have learned this equation in a different science class that you might have had, but for this one, for any distance that is traveled, that equals the rate multiplied by the time. Distance equals rate times time. An example of this would be a rate of going 60 miles per hour. 60 miles per hour, and if you were to travel for 1 hour, so 60 times 1 is 60 miles, obviously, right? If you're going 60 miles per hour and you're traveling for 2 hours, your rate times your time, you're going to go 120 miles. Hopefully this is pretty common sense. If you're going 60 miles in 1 hour, how many miles are you going to go in 2 hours? 120. 60 multiplied by 3. If you're going 60 miles per hour and you travel for 3 hours, you're traveling for 180 miles. So the distance, that equals the rate multiplied by the time. And that's this equation right here. So if we use that equation, we know that together, Eleanor and John drove a total distance of 777 miles. So we're going to have a column for John, or a row for John, and a row for Eleanor. So we're going to kind of define all of these variables. We know the total distance. The total distance is 777. But the rate and the time, those are two things that we still have to define. John drove the first part of the trip and averaged 55 miles per hour. There is John's rate. So under R and under John, we're going to write 55 miles per hour. Eleanor drove the remainder of the trip and averaged 65 miles per hour. So 65 goes right there. So if we multiply the rate by the time, we get the total distance that they traveled. So now we got to take a look at their time. It says, for what length of time did Eleanor drive? There's our variable. What? That question mark, that's our variable. We can call it anything we want to. We'll call it X in this case. For what length of time did Eleanor drive? Eleanor's time is X. So class, here's just another different activity that can make you understand this problem a little bit better. Let's say they drove 10 hours, right? And let's say Eleanor drove 4 of those hours. If Eleanor drove 4, obviously John drove 6, correct? Because 10 minus 4 equals 6. That's just basic math. If we were to say they're driving for 10 hours, let's say Eleanor drove 2 hours. Wouldn't that mean then that John drove 8 hours? Because 8 and 2 is a total of 10. So what I did is I took the total time and I subtracted however long Eleanor drove for. So if we were to talk about how far, or how long rather, John drove, what's John's time, that's another variable we don't know. We could call it Y, but that wouldn't get us very far. What would be better off is if we said, well, they drove a total distance of, or they drove a total time of 13.2 hours. John drove whatever Eleanor did not. So we could say it's 13.2 minus X. In the same way we took 10 minus 4 or 10 minus 8, something like that. Our time is 13.2 minus X. So now we have John driving and we have Eleanor driving. And together they drove 777 miles. So if we have John's rate times time, and we have Eleanor's rate times time, that's going to give us our distance. Distance equals rate times time. So what is John's rate times time? John's rate times time is 55 times 13.2 minus x. 55 times 13.2 minus x plus Eleanor's rate times time. Eleanor's is 65 multiplied by x. Now, class, all we have to do is solve for x, and we got it made. So we're going to distribute here and here. 55 times 13.2, that is 726. 726. 55 times a negative x is a negative 55x. Plus 65x, that equals 777. Solving for x, I would subtract 726, and I get 51. That equals a negative 55x plus 65x is a positive 10x. Divide both sides by 10, and I just found my answer. X equals 51 divided by 10 is 5.1. So now, class, all of these we should really be labeling. If we go back up to the top, what did we even find? We found x. And what is x? X is Eleanor's time. So Eleanor drove 5.1 hours. What length? 5.1 hours. If it asks for how long did John drive or what length of time did John drive, you would just take 13.2 minus 5.1. Together, they drove that 13.2 miles. So your answer, 5.1 hours, is the length of time that Eleanor drove for. Let me know if you have any questions on that one when you come to class tomorrow.